Patrick Bruce Pat Metheny is an American jazz guitarist and composer. He is the leader of the Pat Metheny Group and is also involved in duets, solo works and other side projects. His style incorporates elements of progressive and contemporary jazz, post-bop, Latin jazz and jazz fusion. Metheny has 3 gold albums and 20 Grammy Awards. He is the brother of jazz flugelhornist and journalist Mike Metheny. Biography: Metheny was born and raised in Lee's Summit, Missouri, a suburb southeast of Kansas City. At age 15, he won a downbeat scholarship to a one-week jazz camp and was taken under the wing of guitarist Attila Zoller. Zoller also invited the young Metheny to New York City to see the likes of Jim Hall and Ron Carter. Following his graduation from Lee's Summit High School, Metheny briefly attended the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida in 1972, where he was quickly offered a teaching position. He then moved to Boston to take a teaching assistantship at the Berklee College of Music with jazz vibraphonist Gary Burton. He first made his name as a teenage prodigy under the wing of Burton. In 1974 he made his recording debut on 2 sessions for pianist Paul Blee and Carol Goss Improvising Artists label, along with fretless electric bassist Jaco Pastorius. Metheny entered the wider jazz scene in 1975 when he joined Burton's band, where he played alongside resident jazz guitarist Mick Goodrick. Goodrick was a 1967 alumnus of Berklee, who had held a teaching post there in the early 1970s. The 2 guitarists were interviewed jointly by Guitar Player magazine in 1975, bringing them to the attention of fellow guitar aficionados around the world. Metheny's musical momentum carried him rapidly to the point that he had soon written enough material to record his debut album, Bright Size Life, with Pastorius and drummer Bob Moses. Metheny's next recording, 1977's Watercolors, was the first to feature pianist Lyle Mays, Metheny's most frequent collaborator. The other musicians on this session were Eberhard Weber on upright bass and Danny Gottlieb on drums. Metheny's next album formalized his partnership with Mays and began the Pat Metheny Group, featuring several songs they co-wrote. The album was released as the eponymous Pat Metheny Group on West German musician-producer Manfred H's ECM record label. Metheny also has released solo, trio, quartet and duet recordings with musicians such as Hall, Dave Holland, Roy Haynes, Daninu Horta, Burton, Chick Corea, Pedro Azar, Pastorius, Charlie Haydn, John Scofield, Jack DeJohnette, Herbie Hancock, Bill Stewart, Ornette Coleman, Brad Mahador, Joni Mitchell, Milton Nascimento, Santana, Dominic Miller, Michael Brecker, Trilok Gurtu and many others. Metheny has also joined projects such as Song X with Coleman, Parallel Realities, with Jack DeJohnette, Jazz Baltica with Ulf Ekenius and other Nordic jazz players like EST and Nils Landgren. And he has played with singers from all over the world, such as Silje Nørgaard on Tell Me Where You're Going, Bruce Hornsby on Harbor Lights and Hot House, No One No, Abby Lincoln on A Turtle's Dream and Anna Maria Jopk on Upijny. Metheny has been touring for more than 30 years, playing between 120 and 240 concerts a year. He has 3 children with his wife, Latifah. Pat Metheny Group. The Pat Metheny Group is a band founded in 1977. The first Pat Metheny Group release, 1978's Pat Metheny Group, featured the writing duo of Metheny and Mays, a collaboration which has spanned over 25 years and 15 albums. The recording featured the electric bass playing of Pastorius's proto-copyright Gar copyright, Mark Egan. The second group album, American Garage, was a breakout hit, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Jazz chart and crossing over onto the pop charts as well, largely on the strength of the up-tempo opening track, Cross the Heartland, which became a signature tune for the group. This early incarnation of the group included Dan Gottlieb on drums. The group built upon its success through constant touring across the USA and Europe. The early group featured a unique sound, particularly due to Metheny's Gibson ES-175 guitar coupled to 2 Eventide Clockworks harmonizer digital delay units and Mays Oberheim's sequential circuits Prophet 5 synthesizers and Steinway piano. Even in this early state the band played in a wide range of styles from folk to rock to experimental. Metheny later started working with the Roland GR300 guitar synthesizer and the Synclavier guitar system made by New England Digital. Mays expanded his setup with the Synclavier keyboard and later with various other synthesizers. From 1982 to 1985 the Pat Metheny Group released Off Ramp, a live set, Travels, and First Circle, as well as The Falcon and the Snowman, a soundtrack album for the movie of the same name in which they collaborated with David Bowie. A single from the soundtrack, This Is Not America, reached number 14 in the British Top 40 in early 1985 as well as number 32 in the USA. Off Ramp marked the first appearance of bassist Steve Rodby and Brazilian guest artist Nana Vasconcelos, whose work on percussion and wordless vocals marked the first addition of Latin music shadings to the group sound, a trend which continued and intensified on First Circle with the addition of Argentinian multi-instrumentalist Azza, which also marked the group debut of drummer Paul Wurtico. Both Rodby and Wurtico were members of the Simon & Bard group at the time, and had played in Simon Bard as well, in Chicago, before joining Metheny. This period became a peak of commercial popularity of the band, especially for the live recording Travels. First Circle would also be Metheny's last project with ECM Records. He had been a key artist for ECM, but left following conceptual disagreements with label founder Manfred Eicher. The next Pat Metheny Group releases would be based around a further intensification of the Brazilian rhythms first heard in the early 1980s. Additional Latin musicians appeared as guests, notably Brazilian percussion player Armando Mara Seccional. Still Life was the group's first release on new label G-Fen Records, and featured several popular tracks, followed by Letter from Home, which also featured Azza and Mara Seccional. During this period the Steppenwolf Theatre Company of Chicago featured an assortment of compositions by Metheny and Mays for their production of Lyle Kessler's play Orphans, where it has remained special optional music for all productions of the play around the world since. Metheny then again delved into adventurous solo and band projects, and 4 years went by before the release of the next record for the next Pat Metheny Group, a live set entitled The Road to You, which featured tracks from the 2 G-Fen studio albums amongst new tunes. The group integrated new instrumentation and technologies into its work, notably Mays' unique playing technique accomplished by adding MIDI-controlled synth sounds at command during acoustic solos via a pedal on the piano. Mays and Metheny themselves refer to the following 3 Pat Metheny Group releases as the triptych, We Live Here, Quartet, and Imaginary Day. Moving away from the Latin style which had dominated the releases of the previous 10 years, these albums were the most wide-ranging and least commercial group releases, including experimentations with sequenced synthetic drums on one track, free-form improvisation on acoustic instruments, and symphonic signatures, blues and sonata schemes. After another hiatus, the Pat Metheny Group re-emerged in 2002 with the release of Speaking of Now, another change in direction adding musicians to the band who were a generation younger and thus grew up with the Pat Metheny Group. The new members were drummer Antonio Sanchez from Mexico City, trumpet player Kong Vu, and bassist, vocalist, guitarist, and percussionist Richard Bona from Cameroon. The latest release, 2005's The Way Up, is another large concept record which consists of one 68-minute-long piece, a tightly organized but not through composed piece based on a pair of 3-note kernels, the opening B, A, F and the derived B, A, F. The reception of The Way Up was consistent, with standing ovations in each of the almost 90 concerts during the world tour of 2005. On The Way Up, harmonica player Gra copyright Go I Am Marat from Switzerland was introduced as a new group member, while Bona contributed only as a guest musician. During the world tour Brazilian multi-instrumentalist Nando Loria completed the lineup of the Pat Metheny Group. The Way Up was released through Nonasuch Records and all of Metheny's G-Fen and Warner Brothers back catalogue is to be released on the label. Core members of the group are Metheny, Mays, and Steve Rodby, who joined in 1980. Drummer Paul Wurtico replaced Gottlieb in 1983 and continued to play with the group for more than 18 years, until he was replaced by Sanchez, currently also a member of the Pat Metheny Trio. The current Pat Metheny Group members are Metheny, Mays, Rodby, Sanchez, and Fool. Other musicians that have been hired regularly for Metheny Group tours are Mark Ledford, David Blarmeyers, Mara Sectional, Azza, and Boner. On the most recent tour to promote the record The Way Up, Gra copyright Goya Marrett and Loria joined the group. Pat Metheny has collected 19 Grammy Awards, and of them, as part of the Pat Metheny Group, 10 of those awards were consecutive. Side projects: when working outside of the confines of the PMG, Metheny has shown different sides to his musical personality. On Secret Story and Orchestrion, he has ventured into genres of music not covered by the PMG. In the late 1980s, Metheny began collaborating more with established jazz figures. While in his main career Metheny moved from Brazilian and other styles of Latin jazz into more traditional jazz, he continued to expand his musical boundaries in the mid-90s with the avant-garde albums Zero Tolerance for Silence and The Sign of Four. In 2006, Metheny teamed up with Brad Mehldor and his trio for the non-as-such albums Metheny Mehldor and Metheny Mehldor Quartet. Also in 2006, Metheny appeared as a sideman on Michael Brecker's final album release, Pilgrimage. In 2012, Metheny revisited a quartet approach with Sanchez, Ben Williams and Chris Potter. This ensemble was called the Unity Band. They toured Europe and the US during the latter half of the year. In 2013, as an extension of the Unity Band project, Metheny announced the formation of the new Pat Metheny Unity Group, with the addition of the Italian composer and multi-instrumentalist Giulio Camusi. During 2014 the new PMUG completed its first world tour. Metheny also works for a non-profit organization known as CELP, the California Environmental Legacy Project. Guitar contributions. Continuing the tradition of jazz guitarists borrowing tones and techniques from their rock counterparts, Metheny has made his own additions to the jazz guitar tone palette. 6-string electric Metheny's tone, which has evolved over the years, involves using the natural full-frequency response of his hollow-body guitar, combined with high mid-range settings on his amplifier to create a smooth, sustaining lead sound that is virtually devoid of piercing treble yet is able to cut through a dense mix. By using digital signal processing that involves digital delay chorus and reverb, he has created a big, rich, and resonant instrumental voice. 12-string electric Metheny was an early proponent of the 12-string guitar in jazz. During his 1975 tour with the Gary Burton Quartet, he primarily played electric 12-string guitar against the 6-string work of resident guitarist Mick Gooderick. Prior to Metheny, Pat Martino had used the electric 12-string guitar on a studio album, Desperado, and John McLaughlin had used a double-neck electric guitar with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Ralph Towner was perhaps the first to use acoustic 12-string guitar extensively in jazz, and Larry Coryell and Philippe Catherine made extensive use of acoustic 12-string in alternate tunings at the 1975 Monterey Jazz Festival, later releasing some of the material on their 1976 Twin House album. Metheny used 12-string guitar on his debut album, Bright Size Life, including alternate tuning on sarabhorn, and on later albums. Guitar synthesizer Metheny was also one of the first jazz guitarists to make heavy use of the Roland GR300 guitar synthesizer. While John Abercrombie and Bill Frisell also used Roland guitar synthesizers heavily in the 1980s, Metheny is the only one of the three who still uses the instrument regularly. Unlike many guitar synthesizer users, Metheny limits himself to a very small number of sounds. In interviews, he has argued that each of the timbres achievable through guitar synthesis should be treated as a separate instrument, and that he has tried to master each of these instruments instead of using the synthesizer for incidental color. One of the patches that he has often used is on Roland's JV-80 Vintage Synth expansion card, entitled Pat's GR300. Metheny was also heavily into the Synclavier digital audio workstation made by New England Digital and brought it out on tour starting in the early 1980s. 42-string Picasso guitar Metheny plays a custom-made Picasso eye created by Canadian luthier Linda Manza on Into the Dream, and on the album's quartet, Imaginary Day, Jim Hall and Pat Metheny, Trio Live, and the Speaking of Now Live and Imaginary Day DVDs. Metheny has also used the guitar in his guest appearances on other artists' albums. Manza has also made many acoustic guitars for Metheny, including a mini guitar, an acoustic sitar guitar, and the baritone guitar, which Metheny used for the recording of One Quiet Night. He also used the Picasso on Metheny Mahador Quartet, his second collaboration with pianist Mahador and his trio sidemen Larry Grenadier and Jeff Ballard. The Picasso is featured on Metheny's composition The Sound of Water. Influences: as a young musician, Metheny did everything he could to sound like Wes Montgomery, but when he was 14 or 15, he decided that he felt that it was disrespectful to imitate him. In the liner notes on the two-disc Montgomery compilation Impressions, the Verve Jazz Sides, Metheny is quoted as saying, "Smoke In at the Half Note is the absolute greatest jazz guitar album ever made. It is also the record that taught me how to play." Ornette Coleman's 1968 recording New York Is Now was particularly instrumental in inspiring Metheny to find his own direction. He has recorded Coleman compositions on a number of his records. Worked extensively with Coleman collaborators such as Charlie Haydon, Dewey Redman, and Billy Higgins. And has even made a record, Song X, with Coleman. Metheny's playing also shows significant influence by Hall, Joe DeRio, Kenny Burrell, Joe Pass, McLaughlin and other classic jazz players. Metheny has often been quoted saying that he is as likely to name non-guitarists as significant stylistic influences as fellow guitar players, giving as examples players like Clifford Brown and John Coltrane. He has stated that Miles Davis' live album 4 and More was hugely influential on his pursuit into jazz music. He has also admitted to being heavily influenced by the Beatles, going so far as to say that everything by the Beatles has impacted him as a musician. He has paid significant attention to the evolution of guitar playing across genres, and is familiar with the playing of notables from the likes of rock guitarists Eddie Van Halen to Leo Kottke. In particular, he has been influenced by Brazilian music both the European-influenced jazz sound of the bossa nova and the intensely polyrhythmic Afro-Brazilian sounds of the country's northeast. Metheny made 3 albums on ECM with the Brazilian vocalist and percussionist Nana Vasconcelos in the early 1980s. He also lived in Brazil from the late 1980s to the early 1990s and performed with several local musicians such as Milton Nascimento and Tonino Horta. He also played with Antonio Carlos Jobim as a tribute, in a live performance, and Carnegie Hall salutes the Jazz Masters, Verve 50th anniversary. He is also a fan of several pop music artists, especially singer-songwriters including James Taylor, Bruce Hornsby, Cheap Trick, and Joni Mitchell, with whom he performed on her Shadows and Light live tour. Metheny is also fond of Buckethead's music. He also worked with, sponsored or helped to make recordings of singer-songwriters from all over the world, such as Pedro Azar, Akiko Yano, David Bowie, Silje Nogard, No, and Anna Maria Joke. 2 of Metheny's recordings, The Way Up and Orchestrion, evidence the influence of American minimalist composer Steve Reich and utilize similar rhythmic figures structured around pulse. Reich's composition Electric Counterpoint was first recorded by Metheny and appears on the Different Train CD released by Nonesuch Records in 1987. Metheny Brothers. Metheny took part in recording some of the CDs by his older brother, trumpeter Mike Metheny, a jazz musician and a trumpet player based in Kansas City, Missouri, among them Day in a Euro Night Out and more recently Close Enough for Love. Bibliography, Goins, Wayne E. Emotional Response to Music, Pat Metheny's Secret Story. Edwin Mellon Press. Discography. 1974, Jacko, 1976, Bright Size Life, 1977, Watercolors, 1978, Pat Metheny Group, 1979, New Chautauqua, 1979, American Garage, 1980, 80/81, 1981, As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls, 1982, Off Ramp, 1983, Travels, 1984, Rejoicing, 1984, First Circle, 1985, The Falcon and the Snowman, 1986, Song X, 1987, Still Life, 1989, Letter from Home, 1990, Question and Answer, 1992, Secret Story, 1993. The Road to You, 1994, Zero Tolerance for Silence, 1994, I Can See Your House from Here, 1995, We Live Here, 1996, Quartet, 1996, Passaggio per il Paradiso, 1997, Beyond the Missouri Sky, 1997, The Sign of Four, 1997, Imaginary Day, 1998, Like Minds, 1999, Jim Hall and Pat Metheny, 1999, A Map of the World, 2000, Trio 9900, 2000, Trio, Live, 2002, Speaking of Now, 2003, 1. Quiet Night, 2005, The Way Up, 2006, Metheny Mahador, 2007, Metheny Mahador Quartet, 2008, Day Trip, 2008, Tokyo Day Trip, 2008, Arpeggi, 2009, Quartet Live, 2010, Orchestrion, 2011, What's It All About, 2012, Unity Band, 2013, The Orchestrion Project, 2013, Tap, 2014, Kin. Videography, 1980, DVD Shadows and Light, 1981, DVD Woodstock Jazz Festival, 1990, DVD De Jonette, Hancock, Holland, Metheny in Concert, 1993, DVD Secret Story, Live New Brunswick, New Jersey, 1993, DVD More Travels, 1995, DVD We Live Here, Live in Japan, 2001, DVD Imaginary Day Live, 2003, DVD Speaking of Now Live, 2006, DVD The Way Up, Live, 2012, DVD The Orchestrion Project, 2015, DVD Pat Metheny, The Unity Sessions. Awards and recognition. In 2009, 2010 and 2011, Metheny was voted Guitarist of the Year in Downbeat magazine's Readers' Poll. In 1995, Metheny was granted the Miles Davis Award by the Montreal International Jazz Festival. List of Grammy Awards received by Metheny. References. External links, the Pat Metheny homepage, Biographies, discographies, discussion and songbook forums, tour dates, etc. The most complete Pat Metheny discography with radio shows, promos A.O. Pat Metheny entry at allmusic.com, Pat Metheny profile, NNDB, Pat Metheny's guitar rig, Pat Metheny at the Internet Movie Database, Pat Metheny discography at Music Brains, Pat Metheny's artist file on the Montreal International Jazz Festival's website.